Welcome to the Workology podcast, where we discuss the science and art of the workplace, gain powerful insights, resources, and perspectives on the industries of human resources and recruiting. Join your host, Jessica Miller-Merrill, chief blogger of bloggingforjobs.com, for an in-depth and no-holds-barred look into the future of our most powerful business asset, the employee. And now, here's your host, Jessica, with this episode of Workology.
As the U.S. economy continues to improve, the importance of hiring and retaining the best talent also increases. We simply can't afford to lose new employees we've spent hours sourcing, interviewing, and courting as candidates. The process of onboarding helps new employees transition to their new jobs, to their teams, and just within your culture more quickly and easily. Welcome to the Workology podcast. It's great to have you on a new podcast as part of the Blogging for Jobs family. Today, we'll be discussing how hiring and onboarding new hires is integrating within your workplace and HR technology. My guest today is Todd Owens. He's the CEO of TalentWise. TalentWise automates the hiring process from start to finish with compliance built in, allowing HR to manage offers, screening, onboarding activities with just a single solution. Welcome, Todd, to the podcast. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Jessica.
Tell us a little bit more about your background and who is Todd, as well as TalentWise.
Absolutely. So my name is Todd Owens. I'm the CEO of TalentWise. I have been the CEO since August of last year and was actually part of the founding team of TalentWise back in 2006. We're an screening and onboarding platform that helps companies hire more effectively. We're integrated with the HCM ecosystem around us, and ultimately we're trying to drive efficiency to HR and a better candidate experience for those they're trying to hire. For myself, I started in the Navy, so I cut my teeth way back in the 90s, graduating from the Naval Academy and serving on submarines for about 5 years. Transitioned to the private sector by way of business school. And in early 2001, landed in software product management to be specific, Siebel Systems, which ultimately got acquired by Oracle, and Wind River, which ultimately got acquired by Intel, and that led me to TalentWise, where I was hired again to be part of the founding team.
Wow, from the Navy to technology, and then you've been involved in a lot of different technology companies. Do you think that HR technology it's an exciting place to be? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
It's a super exciting place to be. So I early in the career was at Oracle, right? Again, Siebel Systems, and that was really a very similar sort of story. It was about helping sales forces manage their way from paper and Excel spreadsheets into a much more automated SaaS-based technology environment. And so, I find myself 10 years later doing a very similar sort of thing, but with a focus on HR. So it really is the place to be right now. I think HR technology as a whole is growing faster than its peer categories, and I'm super excited to be a part of it. It's just a great audience, a great customer, very real pains, and I think we all know that it's all about the people. And if we're going to do best by them, we need to be efficient and smart in the way we operate.
Well, let's talk about being smart in how we operate. Today's topic is how technology is transforming the hiring process. Can you talk to us a little bit more about what onboarding is, maybe sort of your unofficial or official definition in your mind?
Sure, absolutely. So to us, onboarding begins with the decision as to who you're going to hire, and it ends on day one. That's the tactical aspects of onboarding, and that's the area that we focus in. That said, of course, there's a strategic aspect of onboarding, which goes much beyond day one. It is really associated with making sure that the new hire is culturally assimilated, that they know their peers, their coworkers, their manager, and that they're really ready to be a productive and engaged employee at the company. So this onboarding process typically starts with the offer letter or an extension, a formal extension of the offer. It is then about screening the individual. Usually this is due diligence on the person, and it consists of background screening, drug screening. It can also, in some cases, consist of skills and behavioral assessments. And then lastly, we get into the administrative process of getting somebody ready for day one, get all that paperwork behind them, the I-9, the W-4, state tax, new hire forms, employee handbooks, and all the associated acknowledgments.
I think it's an important distinction to make the difference between the administrative side of human resources and the strategic. Just because it's not strategic, which is kind of, in some people's point of view, the sexy side of human resources, or maybe the more business focused or imperative part of the business. But if we don't have the foundation, and it's really that day one or when you extend the offer stuff in line, you can't really get to the strategy or the business piece of human resources. One of the reasons why I'm excited to talk about this particular topic with regard to technology and onboarding is because a lot of folks really want to see human resources in a strategic capacity. And I'm one of those people. And we're talking about strategy and how we can move forward, and how our roles as HR professionals or human capital leaders are really imperative to the future success of the organization. But we still need to have our basics, like our house in order. And that's the administrative side of the house. And that is really what is important in getting our employees up to speed quickly, getting the required paperwork so that we don't have any situations or challenges arise, maybe when ICE or another government entity comes knocking on our door. So this is a good time to be talking about onboarding and how technology can help us in those areas. Traditionally speaking, onboarding is often thought of simply completing new hire paperwork and receiving a copy of the employee handbook before the new hire start date. In some companies, they employ more of a passive onboarding strategy, which is a shame because I really feel like the onboarding process, from the point that we offer the job and we extend them the job to, as Todd is saying, the first day, is such a great way to build that relationship and sort of set that foundation for the new employee. Can you talk a little bit with us, Todd, about how onboarding has evolved in your point of view?
Yeah, sure. I think, really it's becoming much smarter as time goes on. So this is in some respects because of necessity. It's just much more complex these days with industry regulations and ICE audits on the rise, Affordable Care Act and benefits enrollment. In all honesty, I think HR departments are doing more with less just so that their companies can be more competitive in the market. It's really forced a rethinking about how they operate. And as a result, technology is coming to bear. So instead of sort of the onboarding process being passive, as you say, and it can be as passive as no onboarding process whatsoever, really just sort of the individual shows up on day one and you wing it. It is much more now about defining a process, not just a checklist, by the way, but actually a process. Ensuring that there are clear owners established and responsibilities in the role, and then really underlying that with a smart technology program that can move the process along and make it as efficient as possible. By using technology, you can open up the days leading up to day one. So instead of waiting for the process to unfold in a conference room or in hallways, if you're winging it, you're able to actually take advantage of the fact that the individual has all their access to records and documents and their spouse and can answer critical questions and show up for day one ready for work. That's what they want. That's actually what the company wants. But historically, it has been a process that is paper intensive and again, has to occupy those really valuable first days on the job.
A 2011 SHRM survey, and we'll mention this link and we'll place it within the notes from the podcast over on bloggingforjobs.com. If you just search for Todd Owens podcast or onboarding podcast, you'll get directed over there. But the 2001 SHRM survey tells us that nearly 1/3 of organizations begin their onboarding activities upon offer acceptance. That means that 2/3 of organizations out there today, they still have a huge opportunity to start that process and start building that relationship and kind of getting that house in order. There's nothing, I think, more important than that employee coming to work on their first day, knowing that they know what they should be paid. Maybe they have an understanding of the benefits, even if it's basic, and know that tax information, because those are always those kind of wild, crazy questions.
Yeah, it's surprising, isn't it? I mean, we found the exact same thing. It's very much a greenfield opportunity for HR and for the vendors that serve them to get in and identify how a process can be improved.
There's some cool technology that's happening in the onboarding space, and that's why you're here with us today. I wanted to talk about a couple, and if you can just kind of walk us through mobile and specifically how tablets are impacting onboarding technology, and then maybe talk a little bit about paperless hiring, particularly with that e-signature process.
Sure, absolutely, Jessica. So mobile is very important. Obviously, we find that an increasing percentage of candidates that are engaging with the TalentWise platform are coming to us through mobile devices. It is the tablet form factor, but it's also the cell phone form factor. So, I think the point of recruiting and hiring in this next decade is going to be about bringing the process to the candidate, where they are, when they are, on the device they're using. If you're not there, if you're not mobile, in all honesty, you're probably missing that segment of the population, the millennial workforce, right? I mean, that's where they operate. I think laptops are a thing of the past. Uh, it's now going to be smart tablets, the Surface, the iPad, coupled with a form factor that allows for phone calls and simple navigation more on the fly, the smartphone. And so we are absolutely developing with mobile first in mind. That is the primary interface, and it's terrific because it enables number one, the mobility aspect. So, in our case, the onboarding process. The new hire can actually navigate through this hiring process not from a conference room, but from the couch, from their sofa, from their office, beside their file cabinet, while talking to their kids or talking to their wife. And so that is, or spouse, I should say. So that is that's very important, that we get the mobility aspect. The other aspect is that you've got native functionality within the cell phone, or tablet that make the process more efficient. And the one that jumps to mind, obviously, is photo capability. So you may be taking a photo to upload to your new employee profile. Or maybe navigating through the pictures you have on your device to share with your new coworkers, or you may be actually taking a picture of a Part 2 document for the Form I-9. So it in many ways disrupts the fax machine. So that's a big aspect of it. And then you brought up another one, which is the electronic signature piece. It's a very big deal. If you don't have electronic signatures built into your process, almost by definition, that means you are now emailing, attaching, printing, signing, scanning, faxing, mailing, and a huge amount of inefficiency comes from that, right? I think your modern worker does not have a fax machine at home. And so it's not wise to ask them to fax. And frankly, they don't make many trips to the post office either. So, electronic signature allows you to keep the entire process on that mobile device, and complete it, without having that extra headache. So it is not trivial to build a compliant e-sign technology, but the best and the smartest platforms out there have it. And I think that's a really key criteria as HR selects, their new technology platforms.
One thing I want to point out for myself is, and for those listening, is that I very rarely use my printer. So I work from home. So everything I try to do is e signature or completely electronic. And I had the unfortunate situation of recently getting a speeding ticket, and but was offered the opportunity to attend a driving school. So I'm going to be doing that online. And when I called the state department for that area, they wanted me to fax something back to them, and I don't even have my printer hooked up to be able to send a fax. And I think a lot of people are like me, let alone I don't necessarily, how am I going to be able to print from my mobile phone or my tablet? That these things can be really complicated. So I had to call the postal service or whoever, UPS or something that does fax receive and drive down there, which took an extra 45 minutes. Whereas if you can just do it electronically, you can just e-signature, fill it out, and send it back. And what would take me 45 minutes could probably take somebody else under 5.
I've had similar experiences with banking where I needed to sign and fax an authorization to wire funds, and it was only fax that was accepted. And so I happened to be on travel at the time. Fortunately, there's a good service called efax.com. I went online, I created a free account just for the purpose of sending one image to a recipient, at which point I then canceled the account so I didn't start incurring the monthly charge. It's crazy to say the least, and not only is it a hassle, but if you're in a time-sensitive process like hiring and onboarding, it slows everything down. And you have to realize also, I guess, that a smart process, when compared with a not so smart process, could actually make the difference in which job that new hire selects, right? Great talent has options, and during sensitive times like onboarding, you should assume that there's another offer that's out there and still pending.
There are a number of apps that are out there. This is kind of a side note that I like personally for my work. So you're describing the service that you mentioned where you can sign up and send. There's a app that I use called DocScan, and then it offers a ability to fax it directly from your phone. So you just take a picture of the paper, but you're still having to sign something and print something off. So it definitely doesn't make it purely an e-signature process. Another thing I wanted to go back to that you mentioned, and this hadn't even dawned on me, but I love this idea, is you're talking about the ability to complete an I-9 form virtually, and you can upload your copy of your documentation for your I-9 using photos from your mobile or tablet device.
Yeah, so this is a very important topic actually in I-9s, and so we need to be very careful not to imply that there is no physical review required because, in fact, the laws are very specific that today HR has a responsibility to physically review those documents. That said, if document storage is part of their policy, at some point they have to be scanned and copied and put in the file. And so we do have some clients who are actually optimizing that a bit by attaching the documents as part of the part one process, so that the part two employer review is simply much faster and doesn't require a trip to the scanner. So yeah, that's a painful part of the new hire process, and I hope it changes at some point. We are actually having some conversations with the government indirectly, and a third-party e-notary company that might actually be able to take even the document review process and make it something that can be done virtually instead.
I love the idea because, man, that is such a tedious process, and it's so just kind of haphazard. I mean, e-verify, it's definitely an improvement, but I like the idea of a notary possibly. So it'll be interesting to follow that process as it changes. So I mentioned before that I'm a fan of a more formal onboarding program. We kind of talked about this passive onboarding, which is good, but I still think that companies are really missing an opportunity to kind of set the stage, get their employees excited about coming to work, getting kind of the boring stuff in the beginning, the boring but necessary, important administrative part done right away so that they can begin assimilating into the organizational culture. Can you talk a little bit about informal and formal onboarding for organizations, maybe why that would be important or not important?
Sure. I think the more formal you can make it, the better. I think we talked briefly about the wing it concept, which I think is the least formal of all. So these are various shades of gray, timely, but not a pun intended. Um, but it is great to have a process that is documented with owners very clearly assigned. I think that's a big part of it, right? It's a coordinated effort, right, to make this go well. It is not centered around HR. HR or the onboarding program manager is the conductor, really. But ultimately, this involves peers, it involves managers and mentors. The stakeholders that are involved in onboarding the new hire are all aware of their role and the timing of their role. So, I think it should not go, without proper recognition that this is a big effort, and it's something that you really can't afford to just kind of wing. HR is at the heart of all of this, right? You've just recruited this individual, you're bringing them in, and now I think you turn into a conductor of sorts. If you're lucky, you've got an individual who's responsible for new employee orientation and onboarding that can serve as this conductor on your behalf. But ultimately, there's a lot of complexity because it cuts across so many different departments, right? I think it cuts across the new hires team in terms of their peers, their manager, cuts across the executive team. There should always be some sort of executive sponsorship and involvement in welcoming new hires, as brief or detailed as it may be. Cuts across some departments like security, perhaps, for security or confidentiality briefings. Certainly, training is involved in terms of new employee orientation, and perhaps, more detailed product and, competitor training. And so, the more formal you can make it in terms of having a clear schedule with clear owners and accountability that this will not be an afterthought, but instead a priority, the better off I think you're going to be.
Let's shift away from technology and focus a little bit about you and particularly your role as the CEO. The subject of talent right now is a main focus for CEOs in 2015. A 2015 PwC study found that 78% of CEOs are concerned over the availability of key skills, which is up from 70% from a year prior. And 59% of those same CEOs are expanding their headcounts from a year ago. So we're doing a lot more hiring. We're looking for more talent. It's a lot more competitive than it was in the past. I wanted to ask you, Todd, as a CEO, how do you prioritize talent in your organization? And what do you look for as far as process and discussion from your HR executive team?
I think we all recognize at TalentWise that talent is number one. Fortunately, we're blessed to work in this industry where we're constantly reminded of that, but we're also reminded by the business itself. We see the difference that great people make to the business, and fortunately, I think we're about 400 employees strong now. Every new hire actually does alter the course of this ship that we're driving, and so that it's super powerful. And we work very hard to get great people, but just like every other business out there, especially in certain positions, the more skilled or specialized positions, it is exceedingly difficult to find that talent in the market and get them closed. And so, we are actively having conversations about, first and foremost, take care of your employees and make sure that they're engaged in their work. I think that, always comes up as, number one on the list of reasons why, employees leave a company. It's because, they're just not engaged. They don't have meaningful work and or they don't know what their role in the bigger picture is. So keep our employees engaged, especially the good ones. And then also figure out a way to grow the company, because most of these CEOs that you talk about are actually expanding, and yet they can't find the talent. So what are you going to do? I think what's ultimately going to happen is that companies are going to have to shift more of their focus towards cultural fit and potential, and a little bit less focus on experience. I've always been a believer that that's a good recipe, and I'm more a believer of that than I ever have been before. I believe that fit, and culture ultimately, drives everything in terms of the employee and the group's ability to get stuff done. And now I think it's just a necessity that you hire for fit and culture, at least on par with experience, if not as a priority.
I agree with you, and I believe that a lot of the HR and recruiting leaders out there are also on the same page. I've asked during a number of recent webinars and speaking engagements for folks to kind of share where they're at with what's the focus for 2015, and a lot of them are leaning in the development and learning and growth side of the house, because they realize that finding the perfect candidate with that right list of qualifications, especially for some of the more technology-focused positions, is few and far between.
I couldn't agree more.
Let's take a bit of a reset. This is Jessica Miller-Merrill, and you're listening to the Workology podcast powered by Blogging for Jobs. Today's topic is all about onboarding and how we can hire and onboard and really take advantage of that window of opportunity and engage our new hires. My guest today is the CEO of TalentWise, Todd Owens, and you can connect with Todd on Twitter at TalentWise. I wanted to refocus the conversation a little bit and go back to the onboarding and tech side. Technology is something that's on the hearts and minds of many HR and recruiting leaders right now. Bursing's 2015 HR Disruption Report discusses the shift from record of employee engagement to user engagement. So specifically about the experience of our employees or the users of our technology and our products. How is TalentWise onboarding technology focusing on user engagement and ease of use for your customers?
User engagement is extremely important, obviously. I mean, what good is technology if it's painful to use and ultimately people find ways not to use it? So, it is important. And I think you just have to put user experience and the UI design front and central in the process by which you develop software. So from a employer perspective, let's talk about that first. The HR perspective, it's all about that dashboard. Is it easily navigable? Is information that you need front and center? Is it being pushed to you? Is it driven around workflows and wizards that help the individual figure out what exactly to do next? Is information and content built into the system itself? So, a good example of that would be the I-90 verify process we've talked about. Is that 5 to 10 step process, easy and intuitive, or does it require a 30-page instruction manual to get through it? As in the, frankly, E-Verify itself comes with an instruction manual. Technology companies in today's HR tech environment don't have that option. The software has to be defined such that a user can light up their computer, navigate to that web site, and start using the software, in an intuitive fashion. From a candidate perspective, it's entirely different. And that's a big principle, right? Is know your user and design for that user. The candidate is being welcome to the company. They are not in need of 30,000-foot level visibility over all of the candidates or all of their coworkers. They just need to get through their process. And so it's much more welcoming in terms of multimedia content, rich content that could include videos, images, documents, and it wraps really the onboarding process that we talked about earlier, the tactical stuff. So all of that form filling and electronic document signing is very important, and it's important that we navigate them through that quickly, but we wrap it in a way that it gives the individual a feeling as though they're being welcome to the company. So, and of course presented on a mobile device. Again, we talked about this earlier, but the candidates out there are going to engage on on a smartphone or on a tablet, whereas we still find that most HR users are accessing TalentWise through a laptop or a desktop form factor. So we have to design for that.
I love it, and I think that it's interesting and also important to note that you guys have two different users in this with each different priorities because they're accessing them for different purposes and points of view. That's why I love technology, because it is it's like an enigma wrapped in bacon. I mean, there's so many different players and pieces involved. I wanted to go ahead and ask you, as we kind of wrap this up here, where can people go to learn more about you and TalentWise?
Absolutely. So the best way to find more about TalentWise is go to talentwise.com. You can also follow us. We're on Twitter at TalentWise, and we're also on Facebook. We have a great suite of videos you can find on our website that are customer testimonials and some product information. And if you're interested in talking to a TalentWise solutions consultant, we're standing by. You can quickly give us your details. We'll get right back to you.
We'll have a link on the podcast information. This publishes on Blogging for Jobs that'll have all Todd's information and a way to be able to connect with him, as well as additional resources that we mentioned throughout the recording of this podcast. I want to thank you for tuning into the Workology podcast hosted by me, Jessica Miller-Merrill, where we discuss the science and art of the workplace, HR, and recruitment. Until next time, you can visit Blogging for Jobs to be able to access all our past podcast episodes. Thanks again.
Production services for the Workology podcast with Jessica.